place in time and space. Here we are,
I mean, you're not wrong.
but out here eating food and yeah, I just got back from our tours and stuff like that. Oh, by the way, hey everybody, I am one of your hosts of the TIWAKS Two Idiots with Approximate Knowledge podcast, where we're super professional and definitely eat on stream because that's what some people do. I'm your host Nathan, and my fantastic co-host. If you want to take that away while I try and eat.
Yeah, I'm Brennan. And I just want to clarify. Nathan, I think we talked about this. You just frame the eating on stream as product placement. No one has to know that we're not actually getting paid. So with that in mind, what are you eating there?
Killer Burger. I don't know if they have them up where you're at, but so not
Haven't seen them
sponsored,
around.
but Killer Burger is a small chain. They have a couple locations here in Washington and Vancouver. At least one or two that I know of in Portland, and it's definitely that like good, solid, um, tasty burgers. It's the thing where when it comes to burgers in general, like I have this idea in my head that I don't like with certain types of foods. You want it to have a clean element to it. I think when you have any amount of like I think of Korean food and Japanese food, French cuisine, um,
I know exactly what you're getting at. Yeah.
Ethiopian food. You wanted to have this kind of like clean-ish element. I do not have that same idea. There's two different foods where it's like it's fine if it has that like I don't want to call it farm fresh, but that kind of element to it. One of them is um I have a very low, very, very high tolerance for bad Chinese food, and I have an even higher tolerance for greasy burgers. And when Killer Burger is at its best, it's a little gross. Like it's kind of the way it's supposed to be, I think.
Do they? So you've probably been to Five Guys. I don't know if you have them where you are, um, but here I think that's probably as close as we get to the kind of burger you're referring to. Does Killer Burger cook them in peanut oil as well, or do they do like the old school, like heavy animal cooking oil?
Um, I don't know what they. I think they do their fries in peanut oil. They might
Hmm.
do it in some kind of like canola vegetable hybrid. Um,
I do like the peanut oil.
funny that you bring up. I'm gonna have like a bunch of food in my beard. Funny that you bring up Five Guys because there, I could throw a rock from the Five Guys parking lot in Hazeldale, and probably like I'd have to have a pretty good wind up. So, Travis could probably throw a rock from the Five Guys parking lot over to the Killer Burger parking lot. Like they're that
There you go.
close together. We have this weird plaza in Hazeldale right off the 78th and 99th. This is super regional, by the way. That um it's we have all these like I want to call it like B minus tier food place or let's call them C plus food places where we have within a 2 block radius there is a Jersey Mike's, a Mod Pizza, a Jimmy John's, a Buffalo Wild Wings, a Wendy's, a Jack in the Box, a Killer Burger, a Little Caesars Pizza, a Round Table Pizza, this place called Jazzy John's, which is a barbecue place. What am I missing? There's a bagel place. Um,
Huh.
and there's 2 grocery stores and a Ross. So
I was just thinking before we sat down today. So we got a bunch of those glass bottle Cokes with the real cane sugar,
mm,
and I I usually go out of my way to not drink things that are not water because I know that it's like the worst thing for you. But when we get these things, it's really bad. Like I'll have one like every day. And this is the one I'm having now, and I was just sitting here just like drowning in existential angst that this is probably the worst dietary choice that I could make all day, and yet it's so delicious. I hate it.
The glass bottle Coke is, by and large, probably one of my favorite, just in general. Because I remember I would buy those at Freddy's every now and again, and I'd always buy them when they came in the 4-pack.
Hmm.
They'd be gone
No,
the
dude,
next day.
it's way worse. We got like the 32 pack, and they're like the liter ones. I
Mm-hmm.
I was not responsible for that buying decision, and I wish that I had been involved in that process because I would not have wanted that.
Yeah, you do. See, deep down, you do.
I hate. My pancreas doesn't want that. You know.
So, top 3 burger choices. Not like burger places, but like top 3 toppings on a burger, or
Oh,
top 3.
toppings.
Well, not toppings, but like, you have your blue
How about like
cheeseburger. You have
top
your
three? Maybe like top three indispensable toppings. Like if you couldn't have anything else.
no. I'm talking like chili cheeseburger or like that
Oh,
kind of thing. Like top 3
I see.
burger combos.
Well, I do like the bacon burger, classic. I I like the, I guess you might call it the McDonald's formula, which ironically I hardly ever get from McDonald's, but I like that classic mixture of, the onions, the pickles, the ketchup and mustard. That's it. I really enjoy that. For me, the pretty much indispensable topping on a burger is pickles. If I don't have pickles on it, I'm kind of not all that into it. Uh, if I have ketchup and mustard but no pickles, then kind of deal. But I really, really like the pickles. Um, in terms of other things, I've never been too into the fried egg burger, but I don't think that's because of any animosity I have towards it. It's just because I think I like the other kinds more. I think I could play plenty nice with a fried egg burger. I kind of want to try. I remember you've mentioned this a few times, the peanut butter burger. I really do want to try that because I really like peanut butter.
So it is my top 3. Um, just burgers to have in general is in no real particular order. I love me a good blue cheeseburger, but
Mm,
that I think George Motes, who wrote Hamburger America, talks about this. Where if you really love like blue cheese on a burger, it's not the burger that you love; it's that you love blue cheese. Like that's part of it. But like a good blue cheese, bacon, caramelized onions, that is
yeah,
on like a
I
Kaiser
love
roll or
onions
something
on
like
the
that.
burger.
Um, I too love that like McDonald's formula. That's very much for me. I take it a little bit of in a different direction because if I'm making my own burgers, what I'll do that super thin patty, the smash burger style, which I am
Right.
in love with. Um, but do that, American onions, preferably caramelized onions, but actually raw onions do nicely to balance
I
pickles.
I like both actually, the raw onions and the caramelized onions.
And I do a burger spread because I actually do not like ketchup on my burgers at all.
Really interesting.
Ketchup is weird for me because it has this really like sweet quality that it's
Yeah,
very overpowering for me, and it ends up being a little too much
you know,
for
I can
most
I can really see
things.
what you're saying because I don't like ketchup on the burger if I can't have mustard in the burger
Hmm.
because
And
they
then,
and vice versa.
but top tier for me has always been that Killer Burgers peanut butter bacon pickle burger. It is. Because people look
Peanut
at me
butter
weird. It's like,
bacon
okay, like walk me
pickle.
through it. So here we go.
I'm interested.
Here's your little walkthrough with Uncle. Here's your walkthrough with Uncle Peanut Butter over here. Um, gonna school you on the ways of culinary expertise. So,
Sounds like one of our D&D cards.
so the way it pans out is you have that the thing that kind of ties it together is more or less the beef because it's weird to think of that as your your neutral, your base flavor that you're working with, and more or less your texture too. That ground beef. I
Right.
like that they don't. It's not a super close textured burger like you get from a lot of fast food places. It's fairly loose, fairly easy. I
Yeah.
mean, you're never really going to be biting into and having to chew against this burger or anything like
Ew.
that. Um,
Not
but
a fan of
it's
that.
you have that beefiness from the beef, which is its own flavor. You get the saltiness that you get from the bacon. You get the crunch and that vinegar aspect that you get from the pickles, and then that sweet, nutty, and they use a fairly sweet peanut butter to go along with it.
That was my next question. Yeah.
And it's a chunky but not super thick peanut butter that they use, and I imagine part of the reason why it's a little runnier is just because it's warm. And then
Hmm.
pair that with mayonnaise and their house sauce,
Hmm.
which is more of a mustard based house sauce, and it's just you end up with creamy and crunchy and beefy and salty and sweet and all these elements coming together in this really perfect way, I think. And it's a weird burger at first, and when I first saw it I was like, I don't know, like that's, you know what, it's weird enough, let's try this. And as it turns out, like it's the white whale that I've been chasing in my own burger escapades. And the thing that always destroys it for me is I keep on using the wrong kind of peanut butter because I keep trying to go like, like Adam's
Oh
peanut butter or
no,
something.
I can see
No,
why
it's
that
got
wouldn't
to
work.
be like bottom shelf, like Skippy's bullshit.
Ugh, I hate that stuff. But I can totally see why you would need that because it's taking the place of the ketchup, which I can see it's kind of taking that same sweet niche in the burger composition while also bringing in that rich nutty flavor. I can totally see how that might work on paper.
It
I
is
I, I
so
really do want to
perfect.
try it. Oh man, now I'm just thinking about food. Now I'm thinking about how I want it. I poured out half my bottle into this glass with ice and as a as an impromptu method of pacing myself, and now I really want to get the rest. But we're gonna move on. No, I know we're here to talk about some role playing systems, but before we talk about that, I do want to bring up a topic that kind of came up in my head within the last few hours, which is I've realized that I do not. How do I put this? I've realized that the way you have to play StarCraft 2 to be good is not the way that I like to play. Because, and I think we may have touched on this briefly before off stream, like in the past, but it's just like in order to get good at those games, there's a certain amount of research and memorization you just have to do. Like there's simply no point in not learning. Like if your only goal is to just climb the ladder, there's no point in not learning build orders. You will never do better than the build orders because the build orders are the result of hundreds of people experimenting hundreds of times to find the most optimum position. But for me, I always find when I'm playing a game like that, if I take the time to do that, and I will definitely start winning, but it just kind of starts feeling empty to me. I don't know if you've had the similar experience.
um so yes and no. I have a little more experience with build orders, not necessarily when it comes to StarCraft 2, although I talk about this fairly frequently. It's my like claim to, I wouldn't even call it a claim to fame. It's just like my one like bragging right is that in season 1 I was like gold 3 or something like that. I am not
Right.
a gold tier player in StarCraft 2. I am bronze at best, and I know that. Um, that was when people were still figuring out what the build orders were going to be,
Right.
and I could play Terran and just like coast through most of the maps, which is why I got to that point. So when I was playing a little competitively, I never learned those build orders, which is why once I jumped back into like season 7 or something like that, why I got absolutely trashed.
Right.
And from there, I started to learn a couple of build orders just as a Zerg player, so I wanted to be able to play the meta. But I was learning more and more that when it comes to StarCraft 2, I'm an early game player at best.
Hmm.
So a bronze tier early game player, which means all that really means is I know how to 1A and that's it. I don't know how tech works. I build a lot of Zerglings, and if that doesn't work, I surrender. So I have like 10-minute games, which is fantastic. I can move on to the next thing. But when I was playing League, you started to learn those build orders a little bit more, and some of that isn't necessarily
Right.
tied to time as it is the gold amount and knowing when to return and stuff like that. And I actually did kind of get into that rhythm when I was playing League, and I never, I should say, I never laddered in League because I knew that that would result in the heat death of the universe because my screaming from rage would shake the earth. I got so salty playing that fucking game.
Oh man.
Oh, it drove me up the wall. But as like I was a Darius player for the most part, who was like one of the quintessential top lane bullies. Like if you're a Darius player, you're a bastard, and you better know it. If you're a Darius player and you don't think you're a bastard, then you're the worst. I at least knew. Okay, like I was
Like,
I was
yeah, I'm
self
sorry.
yes I was self that was the thing is you have to be at the very least self aware of your bastarditude when it comes to playing a character like Darius. But I had that build order memorized, and you had I actually mapped out, and the game has templates you can use to kind of build as you go. If you
Sure.
are running like, oh, this is going to be a top lane where I have to just turtle up and defend myself. Okay, we're gonna get all the resistance and defense items first. Or, oh, I am dominating this lane. We're going straight to Triforce and fuck this guy. Um, all that kind of stuff. So I did learn that kind of build order stuff. But I get what you're saying, because there's the way that I want to play StarCraft too, and it's the campaign mode and the co-op mode. Because I love co-op in that game. I'm so glad they added that to the system. I very much enjoy the campaigns for StarCraft 2. I think there are moments where the storytelling stumbles a little bit, but generally speaking, as somebody who was invested since before Brood Wars, since StarCraft 1, somebody who grew up with that story, seeing it reach kind of a strange climax, but one that was more or less satisfying.
Right.
At least it wasn't, choose your color adventure. Looking at you, Mass
Right.
Effect 3. I still am mad about that. Not as mad as the rest of the community, because I tried to or I'm gonna go off, whatever. I'm gonna go off on this tangent. So for those of you who never played the Mass Effect franchise, and Brennan, I think you would actually really enjoy Mass Effect.
Probably. I've touched on it a little bit, and I know the memes, but I haven't really sat down and played any of the games.
So for those of you, for the uninitiated, Mass Effect was BioWare's uh, one of its big IPs that EA then took up, and for a while was awesome, and then EA did their thing and gated a lot of the content behind paywalls, which sucked. But the original Mass
I
Effect
mean,
1 and 2, um, it's this.
not to interrupt your flow, but I
Go
just
for it.
wanted to comment. I think because BioWare is the same company, I think that the dialogue system in Mass Effect is almost exactly the same as
KOTOR.
in Star Wars: Old Republic.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
Uh,
So to give some more context, I believe when it comes to BioWare, I'm
oh yeah, it is.
fairly certain they fact check me on this one. BioWare did the Baldur's Gate games, I believe. No. Yes? Look that up.
Uh,
So anyway, I do know that
I
BioWare did
know.
Dragon Age and KOTOR and all those games. Um,
I think there've been multiple companies that have done the Baldur's Gate games.
Travis
BioWare
would
did the
Travis would know that off the top of his
first
head.
one. BioWare did at least some of them.
Yeah. So anyway, Mass Effect is their big sci-fi epic. It's the core of the Mass Effect trilogy, as a lot of people know. It spanned 3 games. It was Commander Shepard and his eventual fight against the Reapers to try and save the galaxy. This huge, massive space opera that, by the end of the first game, you had a lot of people who experienced a couple different endings. And then from there, you have this really awesome branching out where each story kind of it pulls it together a little bit just so you have some cohesion between the narratives, but it very much preserves the choices that you made in the first Mass Effect, so that different people that you let live or saved or made bonds with or didn't carry on into the next game. So by Mass Effect
Hmm.
3, the idea was, this was the final chapter, and it was going to be this big, epic confrontation, and your choices matter. I'm going to tell you right now that every choice that you made leading up to the very final decision meant nothing.
I
Because you get
hate
to
that.
pick one of three endings at the very end of the game. Now, Nathan the Rationalist looked at that after having thoroughly enjoyed the journey and said, maybe this is some like super big brain stuff where it is BioWare's commentary on the inevitability of things. It is BioWare saying there are things that you cannot change no matter what you do, which is true. There are lots of
Hmm.
things in life that, whether it's because of your situation or because of choices somebody else made, any combination of that, or just by blind luck, you don't have a
Sure.
say in what's going on.
But then you don't market that experience as a choice-based role-playing game.
Exactly. Now, they expanded the endings with some free DLC, which I think was an interesting move. It was a strange olive branch to extend to fans because it didn't change the fact that your choices didn't really have a
Yeah.
huge impact on things. But I can still, the thing is, I can still go back because I played that trilogy over. I played Mass Effect 2 probably 6 times. I played Mass Effect 3 probably 4 times. I've played the entire trilogy twice. I'll say Mass Effect 1, after playing the other two games, is a little rough in terms of the gameplay, but they lean so heavily on the storyline and stuff like that.
Hmm.
You can suffer through the awkward combat. And then, just to kind of
Always.
cap it all off and tie it all off, they did then release Mass Effect Andromeda, which, from a gameplay standpoint, Mass Effect Andromeda is a blast. It
I've
takes
heard good things.
it's a weird it's weird where the combat flows really well. It feels very, it's a lot of forward momentum. They took some of the classes that I didn't really care about, a lot of like the caster classes and stuff like that, and wrapped it into a slightly less class based system where, if in Mass Effect 2 and 3 and 1 to a much greater extent, if you engage in close quarters combat in any degree, whether it's with shotguns or if you go in hard with your melee weapon, you're going to die. In Mass Effect Andromeda, there are powers that allow you to like jump and power bomb into situations, and so long as you keep up your pressure, you will survive and it will feel awesome.
Hmm.
The storytelling
Mass Effect
needed
Doom.
some work. Now, granted, it's coming off the shoulders of the Mass Effect trilogy. The characters were kind of interesting. Again, the characters needed a little bit of work. But oh my god, some of the facial animations,
Oh no.
some of the facial detail.
Oh dear. I'm looking it up now.
Todd Howard was probably leaning back and saying, Skyrim doesn't look that funny by comparison.
Face models.
They released a patch that, it was a huge patch too, that addressed a lot of those issues, but it's just, and again, a lot of people, the screenshots that you'll see were from kind of the farthest end of
Ugh.
the spectrum in terms of bad. But tells me a lot.
Why did they do this?
They rushed the game. I mean, it's kind of what EA does. They
They
have
all just look
released,
like they all just look like wax figurines.
yeah, and if that game had came out in 2011, people would have lost their mind in terms of like, oh, this is
Oh
so
yeah.
awesome. But that game came out in like that game came out after I graduated college.
Ugh.
Yeah, yeah, it's unfortunate. Um, but now, as I understand it, BioWare's kind of having, I want to call it, actually, I don't know if they're even working on it, but um, I know that they're working on, or at least EA is working on the new Dragon Age game, which I think you might actually enjoy a little bit more. Because that's more of your CRPG. It plays a little more like KOTOR does.
Hmm.
They definitely made it feel a little more action heavy with Dragon Age 2 and Dragon Age 3, but Dragon Age Origins, it's that same stop, assign your commands, let things play out. Things aren't going well, stop, reconfigure. It plays off of more or less second edition D&D rules with some, tweaks just so it
Right.
flows as a video game. But it preserves the idea that Fireball is an overpowered spell. Because in Dragon Age Origins, not only does Fireball have a ridiculous spread and a high range and a lot of damage, it also knocks things down.
Ha! Oh my god,
Yeah.
dude. That would be so bad.
So my
Make
typical
a
standard
make a
move,
make a deck save to avoid being knocked prone. Oh my
my
god.
go-to team in most Dragon Age playthroughs is the main hero, Alistair as a Templar, uh, the oh god, I forgot her name. There's this redheaded assassin chick, who starts off as a bard, but I made her into assassin because she's 1,000 times more useful. So the three of us would get ready, and then I'd have Morgan throw out a fireball and knock everybody down, and then we'd run over and just curb stomp them
Just
while they're
stab
down.
him.
Yeah, yeah, we don't play fair.
Don't let him go up.
Speaking of not playing fair, so we're gonna talk about our experiences in role playing games.
Oh my god.
I'll let you start this, actually.
I don't even know what specific instance you're referring to, but it doesn't even really matter.
I don't know anymore. Pretty much anytime you set up an
uh,
encounter and then we poo poo all over it.
I at this point I literally don't know how to stop you. Like it's one of those really weird situations. And I know we've talked about this on stream before. It's the party that you guys, because you guys are like what, level 16 now, level 15.
We just hit 16.
You just hit 16. You're at the point where I don't think there's really any single creature I could throw at you that could wipe you, except maybe a Tarask. But any other creature in the monster manual, I think if it was just 1v4 against you guys, I think you'd win. I don't think, if there were no other mitigating circumstances, I really don't think there's much that could take you down. However, it's just really weird because if I put you up against like a platoon of like 50 dudes who were in the fiction, highly trained, knew what they were doing, like 25 heavy infantry with big shields and pikes and like a bunch of crossbows, I think they could wipe you out. Because I think that the issue with that would be, but I'm not even sure about that because I think that Pyramus has so much, like Alex sorcerer character just has so much AoE capacity. You could just roast everybody.
Pretty much.
But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. Yeah, I wanted to talk about our experiences with a couple of different systems, and particularly, as you have said many times, and I think very accurately, role-playing systems are game engines, not physics engines, and I think that's a very important thing to talk about. I think that in order to have play that flows, that allows roleplay to be interesting, that allows combat to not be a slog, you need to decide which things you want your system to prioritize and which things you're going to let kind of be minor details that the system really doesn't do more than touch on. So I think that 5th edition is a good example, and I think we have talked about this on stream before. It's a good example of a system which said, let's take the dungeon crawl, adventuring in the wilderness, like a bunch of ragtag murder hobos, and let's do that. And it does it really well. Its combat flows very nicely without being too oversimplified. It allows you to have a great, you can make like you can make a party of 10 fighters and they could all be completely different. However, the thing that 5th edition doesn't do very well is really much else. And
Yeah.
that's fine because that's not what it's supposed to do. But like I think because 5th edition is so accessible, which is awesome. I think that's another thing that was very intentional and that has panned out really heavily in Wizards' favor because now everyone plays D&D. I think the thing that happens is people play so much D&D and they think, well, I want to do this thing, so let's do it as a 5th edition campaign. And you come to a point where it doesn't work that well. I mean, it functions. Like if, for example, you were like, I want to do a political intrigue game where it's like Game of Thrones or Black Sails, that kind of narrative, and we're going to do that. It's like, well, you can. Like, you could just be like, okay, everyone rolling deception checks and insight checks and persuasion checks. Like, that's something you could do. And you know what? If the players had enough imagination and creativity, I'm sure it would be fun. The issue I think that you run into, and this is the thing I wanted to address that I think we don't actually talk about very much. The issue that we run into, I think, when you're looking at political intrigue games with 5th edition is characters are too strong. Part of a political intrigue plot is the need to secure allies, to consolidate your power base, to have other people on your side. If you're so powerful that the result of you being ambushed by 20 of your political rivals' soldiers in an alley is you walking out with another level, political intrigue ceases to have a lot of meaning. And it's true, you know. I mean, I think you get to the point. I remember I tried to solve this problem a little bit in my first game by being like, okay, all the guards are like CR3. There's 2 problems with that. First problem is that stops working after like level 5. Second problem is, and this is something that I've seen a few Reddit posts about this that I think really make good points, which is, you know, CR3 is pretty tough. So the argument can be made is like, hey, why? It begs 2 questions. The first question is, if these guards are so tough, why are they not adventuring? And the second question is, if tough guys like this are willing to work in the guard, why aren't we working in the guard?
Yeah.
You know, and I think those are fair questions, and I think that's kind of a problem with the high power guard thing. And that, I think, is the thing about 5th edition that is making me more and more nowadays want to try other systems like Zweihander, because I get, as a DM, it's fun and it's a great meme when you guys, you know, are just like kicking ass, and it's great. And sometimes it can be really cool. It just kind of, to me, from my side, kind of feels, it stops feeling like an epic narrative and starts just feeling like a video game. And video games are fun. I like video games. But sometimes it just kind of feels like there's no real narrative threat I can throw your way. That's why in my latest game, the threat that you guys are facing is much more like nebulous and non-corporeal, because I know that any big bad boss I put in front of you, you guys are just gonna shit all over. And that's just how the system works. The thing I really like about Zweihander, I don't know if you've been able to had a chance to look at the rulebook at all today.
I have not. I've been working all day.
Yeah, that's totally fine. I've got the book like a month ago, so I've had a little bit of time to look at it. The thing I really like about it is combat. Any combat encounter could kill you. There's no such thing as a safe encounter. In 5th edition, I mean, yes, you could roll nat 1s on every attack, and the enemy could roll nat 20s on every attack, and then you could die. But that doesn't happen very often. In Zweihander, you have a damage threshold. If I'm remembering correctly, you have a damage threshold. If you take less damage than the damage threshold at a time, you take no damage. There's no hit points. But if you surpass the damage threshold, you take a wound. And you can only do that like 3 times before you just die.
There's a couple systems that do something kind of like that.
And the other thing is, I think every damage die is a d6, no matter what it is. And if a damage die lands on us face on a 6, you roll it again. And that cycle does not stop.
Exploding dice.
Yes. And they actually, I think, use this precise example. They say, if a knight rises warhorse into a bunch of peasants, they're going to pull him off his horse and kill him. Like, whereas in 5th edition, the knight would ride out with another level. You know?
More or less. Yep.
So I guess that's kind of been my thought lately. I'm wondering what your perspective has been with the systems that you've worked with. What are the things that you have really liked? What are the things that you have found to be shortcomings of particular systems? I remember you've talked about Stars Without Number, how you really didn't like first edition, and then I don't remember if it was first edition or if there was some kind of errata that was released, but the one that we played, you said you liked more.
So yeah, I've had a little more experience with role playing systems. I do not profess to be some kind of wizened guru when it comes to tabletop role playing games. I'm as much a novice as most people are. My experience with role playing, it's we've played kind of this weird. We started with this weird hodgepodge version of 3.5, but you'd have to ask Alec what exactly we were doing with that. I don't even know that he would remember because that was like 8 or 9 years ago at this point. It was a long time ago,
Jeez.
but that was kind of our start. And then I've mostly played fifth edition, but before we started with that, we did start with first edition Stars Without Number, and I give first edition kind of a bad rap for a number of reasons. One is just I don't have the fondest memories of it. We had I'm not going to talk about this on stream at length, but I made a really bad DMing decision. Things kind of went south, and we were able to salvage it. Like I kind of sat and I'm like, okay, how do I fix this? And we just decided it didn't happen. But we kind of made sense within the narrative space, which is why it continued. We played for a little while longer, but it petered out, and that's about when we discovered fifth edition D&D, and we played a lot of that. Other than that, I played a couple of one shots of Dungeon World, which I adore that system. Not in the same way that I think some people adore, fifth ed or something like that, but I have it holds a very good place in my heart. I've played one game of Monster of the Week, which is another Apocalypse Engine game. For reference, both Dungeon World and Monster of the Week are both powered by the Apocalypse games, and I'll talk about that too. And we've also played second edition Stars Without Number. So you're echoing a lot of the points, because some of the maybe problems I have with fifth ed, where there is a hard transition moment where you go from exploration and storytelling of the world to combat. Now, I don't think that's a shortcoming. I think it's very much by design, because you have that hallmark moment of roll initiative. There's lots of systems that do that. That is not a Dungeons and Dragons thing. That is just, it exists in Stars. It exists in lots of different systems, this initiative-based system. There's nothing wrong with it, but it does serve as a hard disconnect between storytelling and combat. So what a lot of players will kind of end up doing is they think this is the combat, this is the exploration, never the two shall meet. So whenever they do meet in any significant way, if it's not handled well, it can feel awkward and unwieldy. But that can be said of any initiative-based combat system.
Sure.
The nice thing about that is it does create a fairly definitive divide. And for those of us who are here as much to have a role-playing system experience as we're to sit down and play a game and kill monsters, that's great. To have that moment of saying, okay, we're done talking, we're fighting now. Having that divide is nice for some players. I would imagine players like me in particular, I'm famous for zoning out at the table. I try not to do it, but it is why I endeavor to play characters of middling to low intelligence, but not, nothing lower than a 7 for int. It's why I try not to intertwine my narrative too much with this system, because I know my brain is just going to stop functioning at a certain point, and I don't want that to affect other players' experience, where they're saying,
This why?
Here's the big plot point," and I'm like, "What plot point? What are we talking about?"
Is this why when I write your characters in the narrative, you make new characters?
Shut up. So, don't think I won't. I think some of it is just like I get an idea for what I want to do, but I would imagine that there is something subliminal happening there.
But I think it's I'll let you continue, but I do think it's kind of funny, because I think we're coming at it a little bit from different perspectives. Because for me, whenever I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh man, Nathan's not gotten to say anything, and like, half an hour. Like, or I'll be like, man, I feel like Callan hasn't really gotten to do anything except make quippy dad one-liners for the last like 3 sessions. Like we need to bring his plot back into the fore. Whereas it kind of sometimes I kind of have to remind myself that there are occasions where you're like, no, I like making quippy dad joke one-liners.
Yeah, like if I want to be, uh, take this in a positive way. When I decide that okay, I'm invested, I'm going to be in this narrative. That's when I step in and make myself known. But I have actually really enjoyed watching the other three kind of take the reins in a lot of regards. Whether it's Pyramid's like super far out thought processes. You have Xavier's insistence on shattering every social norm, or Bobby
and every social
being.
institution.
Um, but yeah, then you have systems like the Powered by the Apocalypse games, which do not have a traditional initiative system. You can cake them into it, and it's fine. But it's very much a the narrative and the combat for what they are and for what they exist. There is no definitive break point in between. Excuse me, in between the two. So you end up having a lot of situations where somebody will be trying to pick a lock or something like that. And your DM will say, okay, well, while you're trying to pick that lock, the goblin horde is coming. You're going to be working on that lock. What are the rest of you doing? But there's never a moment where it's roll initiative, so you don't have on the rogue's turn, they're continually rolling to try and pick this lock. You're more or less summing up what a lot of tables will have is an entire session long encounter. And depending on how you run it, you can boil that down into 15 or 20 minutes.
Well, and the thing I really like about that is the turn-based system has many great strengths, and I think that one of its most unsung strengths is the ability to help more passive players have an excuse to get involved in the narrative. Because it's your turn. You have to do something. Because I think that there are those players who they want to do stuff, but whether it's because there's a lot of loud players or it's because they just are kind of just want to sit back a little bit, they don't feel like they can insert themselves very often. But when it's their turn, you have to do something. I think that's an advantage of the turn system. But the thing that I really like as someone who really likes to get into that, I mean, I think it comes back to choice. Just like we were talking about with role-playing games, like video games, it comes back to that choice narrative. And I think that the turn-based system can kind of discourage choice because once you get proficient enough in it, there becomes that idea of, well, I know what the best thing to do is, and if I'm not doing that, I feel silly. And ironically, this kind of ties back to what we were saying about StarCraft. I promise we didn't plan this, guys. We're not this smart. But there is that idea of I can no longer be creative because if I'm being creative, I'm not, because I know I'm not doing the smartest decision. Whereas in a non-turn based system, you can say, what can we do collaboratively as a group to solve this problem? So instead of saying like for example, if you have two fighter characters with a sword and board in Dungeon World, you could say, well, me and Terrence, we're gonna get together on this bridge and form a shield barricade and stop the goblin horde from coming across. Whereas in 5th edition, you would have to be like, okay, well, I'm gonna ready my action to move when he moves so that we can both be there at the same time. But then it's kind of like, well, but shouldn't I just take the dodge action or use a ranged weapon, I like the kind of unbound combat structure like you're mentioning because it allows that flexibility, but at the same time I can totally see why I would argue how do I put this? I would argue the turn-based system is more accessible, especially for a DM. Because I think the hardest thing to do as a DM, and the thing that is arguably given very little attention in people telling you what to do as a DM, is making sure that everyone's having fun. And it's really easy in a non-turn-based system for the very loud people to do all the talking.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a new DM, or even not so new DM, I know I've been guilty of this. If there's no if that quiet player's turn isn't coming, it's easy to be like, oh crap, it's been an hour and they have done nothing. So I think there's advantages and disadvantages to both, like you're saying.
You mentioned that I have an issue with stars that number, and actually,
Yeah.
it's a funny thing. I'd have to go back and look at the second edition rule book to confirm whether or not they did anything with this. The problem that I have with first edition stars that number, problems, I should say. The first issue, and I'm gonna talk about this and kind of glaze over it a little bit, was with starship combat. It's why
Mm.
in the first Swan Song on JP McDaniel's roleplay, why they never really addressed it is because starship combat in first edition Stars Without Number is complicated as hell. Because
Mm.
it's not necessarily here's our positioning, here's our range, the way second edition did, which was much more interesting, I think. You had to not only account for what you were doing on the ship, but what phase of reality that your ship was in, and what phase of reality, whatever dimensional space the other ship was in. Because there were different, the ideas that you're jumping in and out of spike space, this extra dimensional plane, while this combat is happening. And it's why they approached it once and then never touched it again, because it's just too damn complicated.
That sounds like a really interesting idea for a book.
Yes. It is horrible otherwise. The other issue that I had, and I'd have to go back to read the rulebook to fix it. I wish I'd had the time to look at it today. Is that in first edition stars, it is a pseudo D20 based system, but it's also a 2D6 based system where
Mm.
your attack rolls and your initiative rolls, I believe, are all made with a D20. It also used that weird THACO system for hitting. To hit armor
Mm.
class 0, I believe is what that's a
Oh,
reference
right.
to. Where you just take the enemy's armor class and the number that you rolled and your bonus to attack, and if it equals 20, then you hit. That's the way THACO is
Right.
designed, or that kind of,
Right.
not THACO specifically, but that sort of system. So already there's an innate metagaming that happens with that.
Mm.
So take that for what it's worth. But all of your skills are rolled at 2d6.
Mm-hmm.
It was always and forever infinitely more useful to invest your skill points that you got through the level progression, to invest them in skills that you would use, and it was kind of difficult to rationalize putting those points into any of your combat skills. Why invest in these combat skills when I'm getting maybe what's up, Rogan? Why invest in these skills to try and be 5% better at hitting a target, where if I invest in my athletic skill, I am 12.5% better immediately?
Mm-hmm.
To answer your question, Brogan, I have not played Rifts or GURPS, but I've heard of them both. Um, it Brogan, who I used to work with at Freddy's, he asked the question if we've ever seen or heard of Rifts or GURPS. For those of you who are listening,
I
after the
haven't.
fact,
Let me
oh
actually
yeah,
open up the. Let me actually open up the stream one down here so that I
but
can see the chat.
yeah, that's, and I actually don't know if they fixed it in second edition stars. I'd have to go back and look at it. But that's kind of my experience with those role playing systems. I've definitely played fifth ed the most, but I think a lot of it at this point have. Um, it's
I do
been
recall in. Oh, go ahead.
to go for it.
I was just gonna say I do recall briefly. I was just gonna say I do recall in second edition. I think we had the 2d6 as well in the skills, because I remember Travis' character taking the ability where he could roll 3d6 for
Yeah.
his
Okay.
athletics.
Yep. It was 2d6. I stopped boiling combat encounters to initiative rolls, and I started running it like powered by the apocalypse. I remember now. The threshold for success becomes so much easier at that point, though. So I'd have to. We basically, if I wanted to play another like sci-fi opera or something like that, we'd have to find a new system to play it on. I think. Not that I think Stars is
Yeah,
bad. I think it's totally serviceable, and it's a
that
great
game was so much
bridge.
fun.
It's I just need to find something that I think will work a little bit better. For
I
whatever I
know it
need
was
to
super
do.
stressful to run, and like
Oh
that's
my
totally
god.
fine. I'm just like, it was so much fun to play every time. I was like, oh boy, I don't know what's gonna happen. It's so
Oh,
much
I
fun.
didn't either. You
Like, but in all honesty, I think in terms of like pulse pounding action and intrigue, that may have been like my favorite game that I ever played in, because like every single session was honestly felt like a super epic like episode of a TV show. We were always doing this super cool stuff. There was this really awesome like intrigue plot going on behind the scenes that we didn't really know quite what was going on, but
I didn't either.
it I know you didn't either, but it didn't seem that way. It seemed like you knew what was going on. Um and it was really fun to be a robot. I do remember. I feel like we go back and forth like this sometimes whenever I play for you as DM. I'm like, I want to be this, and you're like, no. I'm like, how come though? And you're like, you raise a fair point. It was very fun to be a robot.
I think that is our fairly regular back and forth when it comes to character creation. Is each of us comes to each other with a ludicrous idea, we both say no, and then we say counter argument yes, and you're like, and we both say you make a salient point. Let's go for it.
Can't argue with that.
Yeah, I see. Ironclad, perfect argument. Let's get this man in the debates.
Oh,
Um,
oh god, I love
it's
it.
that was an interesting game to run because after about session 7 or 8, I would write up a plan for what I wanted to do with that session. And then by the time I got through the intro sequence that I always did, I had thrown that away. I
Oh man, it was so fun
completely
though.
abandoned every idea that I had had at that point, and I would just wing it. And I regretted every second of it being like, why couldn't I stick to the plan? I knew what was going to happen if I stuck to this plan, like barring character intervention, because I don't want to take away player
Right,
agency. That's a horrible thing to do, generally speaking. And I want to make sure that everybody feels like they're contributing to the plot, and I want them to feel like if
oh,
they do that weird out of left field thing that Nathan planned for that, or he's going to be able to adapt to it. The way I was able to adapt to anything is because I adapted to everything.
oh my god. I'm just like I'm thinking back to like my favorite moments. I can think of so many like off the top of my head of those moments where I'm just like that are like top 10 role playing moments. Like the battle in the hotel room was so cool. It was like pulse pounding action. That moment where Travis was like, "Guys, we need to go down to the planet and save these people from the incoming nuke." That was like, "Oh my god, this is so
That was really
awesome!"
exciting to do. That was actually a lot of
Like
fun.
it was it was so much fun every time, and yeah, it was just so great.
I enjoyed
So great.
that. That was definitely it was a weird thing. So this Stars Without Number campaign. It's a good thing that I have the ability to do a lot of talking because we're probably gonna go over an hour.
It's fine.
That second Stars Without Number campaign, it was set in this sector, and the idea that I originally had was kind of a playoff of a lot of Mech Warrior was actually kind of where I took the government system base for, where you had these noble houses that had come up after the attempted colonization of the different sectors and stuff like that. So you had the three major houses and a bunch of minor houses underneath that, and the major houses were pretty much set. There was no changing where they were in the kind of structure, but in the minor houses, there was a lot of backbiting, a lot of political infighting, a lot of intra-house combat that would happen in these weird shadow wars, and a lot of basically every planet that wasn't a house capital planet was their own version of like Vietnam or Korea or the Middle East or Africa. Literally any country that has had a proxy war forced upon it, that's what those planets would
Right.
end up being to a certain extent. um and it was right in the aftermath of the assassination of the emperor of the sector, and the
Oh
noble house
yeah.
had kind of reached its deposition point. The whole plot of that is that the subplot is that two of the characters in the group, one of them is
Right.
very closely associated with the actual assassin of the emperor, and the other
That was
character,
Cameron's character, right?
yes, and then uh the people that actually plotted the assassination were under the impression that Holly's character knew about it. That she
Oh, right,
knew that
right.
it was them. She didn't know.
So they were trying to silence her. I remember that.
That was
I
kind of that.
remember
And
when
oh
I
man,
remember when she I remember when she was like, we were like, hey, so you have a hit on you. She's like, cool. I'm gonna go club hopping. And I was like, are you gonna take the giant killer robot that has nothing to do? She's like, nah, I'm good.
and then I let her down
Okay.
soft. I'm like, I'm not gonna kill you right now, but you
I
need to
remember
know.
that.
You need to
I,
know.
I, I actually I remember that encounter very, very precisely because it was so funny to me because I recall she met up with this guy
Yep.
and he was like, I was sent here to kill you, but I won't because I like you. But it was just really funny because she was just being really rude, like before that. So he was like, I like you. And I was like, do you?
I didn't have it in me to just like ice her then and there because that was
I
actually
know.
something that I had planned out. That wasn't one of those off the cuff moments. It was one of the very few moments that I did have planned. Um,
But I imagine that you expected that encounter to happen with one of the two, either the giant robot or the huge Jack Space Marine nearby.
I honestly expected it to be with both, where you guys just shit stomped him. Because the thought that I had is that it'd just be like Simon and the Brobot just hanging out in a corner and not associating with Iffy, so that when the guy tried to get her, like you guys would just follow him and stab him and then rip him in half. Um,
Didn't wasn't it Teletubby? Isn't that what Simon called me?
yep,
I fucking loved that character. That was so much fun.
it was the reminder that Travis needs to play a character who, while they're 100% capable of engaging in a serious narrative, they need to have the option to jackass around a little bit. Like a half cup of jackassing, it just kind of that reminder that everybody else
And
has already had, but I hadn't experienced it as a DM in a long time.
and then there's Bobby.
Oh, Bobby.
It's the opposite.
Yeah, except the one gut wrenching, like heart
Yeah, that
stabbing.
was kind of fucked up.
I remember now he told me about that moment. So in the game that we're in, he dropped the Bobby's a 16-year-old Goliath. He has an intelligence of what, 6
Six.
or
I
something
think
like
it's six.
that. He is aware of the fact that he is developmentally disabled, but drop the moment of why do I have to go out and fight all these monsters and stuff like that when there's all these adults who can deal with this again? Why don't I get to be a kid? And I kind of sat there. I'm like, I thought back. I'm like, Travis told me that this was the arc that he was going to take, and I still wasn't ready for it.
Kind of fucked me up. I was like, damn.
It got me hard. That was
I was like, and I wasn't sure what to do too, like role playing as the like wizarding faculty because they were like, I mean, if it was just like a normal kid who had been like forced to fight, it would have been like, hey, you know what? We'll give you a scholarship. But what the fuck's he gonna do with a scholarship to the Wizard University?
yeah, that doesn't
Like
mean anything.
he can't. He'll just flunk out. Like he can't alligator his way through basic transmutation. Although he sure as hell could try.
And now we're gonna start a coup
Oh god,
against
I
your
know.
fictional government.
This is your second contemplated uh, government toppling.
Yeah, but this one is going to be actionable because now Callan
You
has
actually have power.
clout and power. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put together an orc uprising and right when the moment is right, when it's like, oh well, maybe we should take care of the dragons, just rise and be like, you got bigger problems.
I think it's this is something I think your character would recognize. Like it may not even be that hard. You may just be able to go talk to the fucking president dude that you already know and be like, hey, how would you like to be the actual president?
With some
You know,
stipulations this
I mean, he's kind of already on your side politically.
with this 400-pound check and balance.
Yeah.
So really, who's actually in charge?
Oh, you. Yes, you. Of course.
Oh, have you had a chance to
Uh,
boot up any of the Doom games yet that I sent you?
I have not gotten them installed yet. Every day I'm like gonna install them tonight, and then I wake up in the morning. I'm like, fuck.
So, I guess in the one of the other ongoing segments of this, what have you been playing recently? I know you've been playing StarCraft 2, but you been playing anything else?
I'm playing a little StarCraft. Had been playing some more Age of Empires a little bit.
You played a
Like
little
I've
bit of
just been
GTA
meaning to
with
download.
us.
Yeah, I did. I played a little bit. That was so much fun, and it was a reminder that I do not have the temperament to play that game seriously.
You're not supposed to.
Because if I play that game seriously, I start to get kind of sad. Like I'm kind of bummed out. I don't like doing crime, but like if I play it, if,
It's because like alignments don't exist in the real world for what it's worth. But if there was a lawful good person, it's probably you.
I'm just like I like even when I was doing the intro, every like just robbing that bank, I was like, man, these people probably had a family. I bet I bet a bunch of people are gonna lose their job.
Man, you'll have one hell of a perspective if you ever boot up the story mode. Then
I'm like, this is kind of a bummer. But if we just play it like a total meme, and I'm flying with Camden in his flying car, and throwing pipe bombs out the window, then it's fun.
yeah, it's it's. I think you would enjoy the single player campaign. It's definitely a very interesting narrative they've woven. The three, I won't spend too much time on this, but
Sure,
the
sure.
three characters that they have for that, Franklin, Michael, and Trevor, kind of represent like the kind of three ways that people can tend to go about playing Grand Theft Auto. I think, where I
Yeah.
think Franklin represents a lot of the people just they're there to play the game. They're not super serious about it. Just kind of want to have fun, hang out, play the game. Michael represents a lot of like the RP players who want to like get into the narrative and are really there for the story. And when it comes to the multiplayer stuff, they want to do like the RP servers and stuff like that. And Trevor represents all the players who wish there was a cannibal button.
And then there's me who makes Kentucky Fried Wild West lawmaker, and then buys only pink skins for my guns.
Trevor.
Dude, my character model. That may have been the
The
most fun
nightmare.
I had the whole night. It was the most horrific abomination.
I knew you were gonna make something ugly, and I've seen Rockstar's character creators. They don't make pretty people, and I was still surprised, shocked.
The hat really brings it home.
We went and after a couple days ago, we went and bought all matching white cowboy hats, and we tried to do some of the survival maps with the heavy revolver only. We actually got to like round 6 or 7, so we got way further than we had any right to.
Oh wow.
It
Oh
was
my god.
interesting. Um,
I wish
so
there was an easy way to bring up my character model without having to like launch the whole game, because I would put it on stream.
so other than Age of Empires and StarCraft, have you been playing anything else?
Not really. I've been doing a lot of drawing, so that's been taking time. Um, no, not other than that. I've been, doing some other stuff, working on D&D. I always have this weird perspective with my game that I run because, like, for example, last night I was like, they're probably not going to get to the library today, but I better put something together. And then you didn't, and I was like, cool. Now I can actually prep something that's
Yeah.
actually good. You know, I've gotten pretty good at just like as long as I have a map, I've gotten pretty good at flying by the seat of my pants. But the issue comes when it's the issue comes for me when it's like I don't have a map at all, and then it can kind of fall apart. I feel like there's a part of me going back to the general discussion of role playing games. there's a part of me that would enjoy a few more games where we don't have a checkerboard map, because I like to be able to kind of theater of mind it, but at the same time, there's the part of me that has like kind of, been raised as it were on the way we play, really likes the map. I like that visual representation. It kind of helps me focus, I guess. But at the same time, I can accept the limiting nature of it. You know.
So I actually kind of have an interesting or different perspective to offer on that, and I can actually speak on Alex's behalf for a little bit. I know Alex struggles with theater of the mind to a certain extent when it comes, so having that
Mm,
grid is very helpful for him, and it's to a lesser extent, but kind of for the same reason, very helpful for me at the same time. It's interesting in Macy's Amnesia campaign and Cameron's Everfall 2, both of those, most of our combat encounters have happened in theater of the mind. Um, and in most of those situations, we've done them in such a way where distance and spacing hasn't really ever mattered. So it's never become an issue. But the moments where we have to start keeping track of that is where things get a little bit difficult. It's why
hmm
I very much prize the fact in Everfall 2 that I'm playing a gunslinger. So I just have to ask the question, is it within 600 feet? Yes? Okay, perfect.
hmm.
Playing
You know,
melee in Theater of the Mind is a little complicated.
speaking of theater of the mind games, I'm reminded of Round Table of Fire 2. That was when I think you had to leave early,
Yep.
which was a huge bummer because I was having a great time. I mean, I had a great time anyway, but it was, I really was enjoying the synergy of our characters. Um, but yeah, that to me was an example of a game where we played by theater of the mind that I really enjoyed, because for the most part we were all so seasoned in the rules, and so we could, at least from my perspective, it felt like I could very comfortably just be like, cool, this is what we're going to do, you know. But I can also really see how having that grid can ground you, and I I I can definitely relate to that, I think, but I think not as much. Like I should say I can relate to that, but I don't think for me it's as much of a problem if it's not there, if that makes sense.
I get that. I think some of it comes
Yeah,
from a lot of the turn-based tactics games that I've played recently, between Fire Emblem and XCOM and Advance Wars and stuff like that, which have I mean the grid system is there.
sure.
Um, it's now I just want to play like a Fire Emblem based tabletop RPG.
Of
Hopefully
course you
one
do.
that isn't fan made and janky, but also one that isn't done by Nintendo. I would like that to be handled by an actual tabletop role playing company. Anyway, trying to think about what I've
Well,
been
speaking of
playing.
which, please, I was just gonna look and see. You know if Baldur's Gate 3 has got a release date yet?
No, I don't think so. I haven't checked. So I've been playing. I've been playing a lot of Grand Theft Auto again. I'm playing through the story campaign of that, and I'm enjoying that for the most part. I'm definitely becoming aware that that game is, nine, 8 or 9 years old at this point. There's definitely moments where I feel it, and it has that pretty typical Rockstar jank that just exists in their games. And that's been kind of an interesting. I would dare to call that an uphill battle in a lot of ways. Um, I've kind of gone back and played a little bit of Doom. Um, replaying through Doom Eternal. I had forgotten how much of a video game Doom Eternal is, because it's very
Mm,
arcadey in its feel, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's part of what makes it so fantastic. But I also forgotten how actually unrelentingly difficult that game can be at times. Um, because I booted it back up in Nightmare, because I the way I see it, I've already beaten the game in Nightmare once, and playing it on an ultra violence just feels like I'm stepping down from a pedestal that I deserve to be on. I don't. Um, But like the moment where part of it is like you have to get the controls into your hands a little bit because it is very much like a muscle memory type thing, but trying to jump back into it and getting into the first Marauder fight you get right at the second part of the cultist base. That's a that's a hard fight. Like
Mm.
especially like I remember the first time I played through it was in Ultra Violence, and by the time I hit it on Nightmare, like I already played through the game almost all the way through. So I'd already kind of gotten into the flow of everything. Like I was set and ready to go. So then to jump back into the game after a couple of months of not playing it, the Marauder kicked the shit out of me. And then that fight in particular is so frustrating because you beat the first Marauder and then you jump down a hole and then you have to fight two of them. Like this boss fight that already kind of kicked your ass once, and now you gotta kill two of them. So by the time like it's by the time you get to like the Mars core level or the Necroval Citadel, which has one of my favorite music tracks in the entire game, the Creatures of Necroval, I believe. Um, your fight like every third arena has a Marauder in it, or not a Marauder, a Doom Hunter. By the time you fight the Marauder, he shows up everywhere. I did a long I'll talk about this. And a long Facebook post about somebody was talking about like what is the worst part of your favorite game. And
I think I saw that. Wasn't it Twitter?
yeah, it was on Twitter. Unequivocally, I think the Marauder is the worst part of Doom Eternal, but that's not saying the Marauder is bad. The Marauder is in the game. He is one of the Night Sentinels who turned away and was corrupted by Khan Maker and Hell's Energies, and now serves the Khan Maker to further the corruption of Earth. It's conceptually he's really cool. Between the face mask and the kind of split armor. In fact, he's super jacked. He's got like the laser axe and the corrupted super shotgun. Like conceptually, he's awesome, but he does not fit into the way the game is meant to be played. Where
Mm.
every creature in this game has some kind of weakness that you can exploit, but by and large, pretty much all of them, you can just shoot them until they die.
Mm.
Between whether it's the Titan or the Doom Hunter or the Archvile, the Barons of Hell, or I guess the Fireborn Barons at this point, you can all just shoot them until they die. And you don't really
Mm.
need to worry about focusing down a specific weak point or whatever XYZ thing. I guess with the Doom Hunter, you have to destroy the sled first, but with the Marauder, you have to time your combat he will always put up his shield unless he's going to attack you. So then you have to wait for him to attack you, but specifically in a melee attack. If he shoots with the shotgun, it means you got too close. If you try and engage him from far range, he'll summon the spirit dog and keep his shield up the entire time. So you have to maintain the specific distance with him this entire time. And then to kill him, you kind of need to cheese him, where you just fast cycle
Right.
between the ballista and the super shotgun, and just if you get lucky, you can two cycle him or whatever. That doesn't play nicely, I think, necessarily with the way the rest of Doom Eternal flows, where you have this cavalcade of monsters, and they all bring a lot to the table between the firepower of the Mancubus, the rapid movement, and the sheer volume of missiles that come from the Revenant, the revamped zombie soldiers, the imps, the way they dart around the maps, and the additions of monsters from previous games like the Pain Elemental, who can get in trouble. He can fall in a wood chipper. Between him and the Archvile, they all do these different things and they bring something to the table. But when it comes to actually dealing with them, you just shoot them. And it
Yeah.
seems really simple and stupid. The fact that there's an enemy that you have to think more tactically seems like a really good idea. And it almost is. And I don't think the presence of the Marauder ruins Doom Eternal. It still is a good part of it, but I think it's the worst part is The other, and actually, this is such a nitpicky thing, but I think this would go a long way, and just in terms of making me not think about it. His run cycle is super stupid.
Hmm.
Like every creature has a movement or a run cycle that more or less fits, and his run cycle is like this. It's this 0 to T 1000 run cycle, if you can imagine what I'm talking about, where like he
Yeah.
is stationary and then he's just this the entire time, which is super interesting for our audio listeners who don't know what I just did. But for those of you who are going to be watching this on the VOD when I put this on YouTube, he does that what is it, Robert Patrick is the guy's name. He does that run at you, which it would be terrifying if it didn't look like it didn't have any weight to it. Um,
Oh yeah. Got that arcade jank.
I wouldn't even call it that. It's just like it's the one thing, the one part of that game that feels rushed, and not
Mm.
even like they just push it out a little too early in terms of that. But I think the Marauder deserves an actual just full scale redesign rather than more
Mm.
polish, because you polish it more, but you still run into the same issue where if he had been like this ultra, like the fact that he's resistant to all your super weapons too is kind of bullshit, and all these other things where if he was resistant to the super weapons but like this titan, kind of like the tyrant but faster moving, and punished you for a lot of your actions but wasn't ever outright invulnerable, I think that might have been a better choice. Just
I mean,
the fact that you have to turn all your attention to him speaks volumes. You either need to deal with everything and then deal with him and keep him in the peripheral, or just deal with him right then and there and ignore everything else. Where like if the tyrant hits the field, you just gotta whittle away, but you still gotta be aware of everything that's happening. But when
right.
it's just it's ah
It seems like the heart of the problem. I haven't played Doom Eternal, but from watching you play and from hearing you talk about it, it seems like the heart of the problem is most of the enemies you face, their primary threat to you is their primary impediment to your progress is their DPS potential, whereas in terms of the Marauder, their impediment to your progress is their tankiness.
it's not necessarily even their tankiness, it's that he distracts from your ability to deal damage outside. I'm sure there are
Right.
pro Doom players, the speedrunners in particular, that have him boiled down to a science where he's not even an issue. But
Right.
and I will say, while I find the Doom Hunter or the Marauder to be like my least favorite part of the game, it's sad because his glory kills are my favorite.
Hmm.
They have one where you go in for like the punch, which like should be, and this is one of the biggest strengths of Doom Eternal is the progressive demon damage they do. Whereas you whittle away at them, that actually blows off like bits of flesh and exposes the bone and the muscle. Like that is
That's really cool.
such a good detail, and it is such a good replacement for like a hit point bar or something like that. But it gives you an idea of where you're at with that monster. The fact that like when you go in for that glory kill, like it's it's a scene out of a horror film in most cases where like his rib cage is exposed and like the
Yeah.
mask is kind of ripped away and stuff like that, and the horn is broken, and you go in for the punch and he goes in for the super defiant like catch the fist, so it's kind of like it's this here, and then the way you deal with him is you just extend the blade into his brain. Like
Huh.
it's such a cool glory kill, and all of his glory kills are super satisfying, but you're so frustrated with him that you don't feel relief, you're just pissed, which I guess puts you in the mindset of the Doomslayer. So
Method
maybe the
acting.
Marauder is the best part of the game, I don't know.
Method acting.
Yeah, I guess. But I've been playing a little bit of that, and then I picked up this game, Ion Fury, which I've talked about a little bit. Maybe I haven't talked to you about it. So
I'm not sure you have.
Ion Fury, it had an early access period, and has done a couple previews every now and again. Back when it was called Ion Maiden. Now, for those of the more litigious of you, you understand that that might present a legal problem because there's another entity out there called Iron Maiden, a metal band. And we're too happy about that. There's a lawsuit. Actually, also as an aside, and this deserves to be addressed, one of the, I don't know if they were a lead developer, but somebody deeply involved in the development cycle of Ion Fury, made a couple of transphobic comments
Mm.
in social media standings. The developers for this game, 3D Realms, went and then I think they donated like $10,000 to the Trevor Project, which, I mean, okay. Here at this podcast, and this needs to be, I don't actually, this doesn't need to be said because those of you who know us know that we're like this. But for those of you who don't know us very well, this podcast is as much a place for two idiots with approximate knowledge to come together and talk about, well, and really just BS about stuff that we think we know about. We want this also to feel like a safe place, not for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
This is as much for Brennan and I. It is our place to just hang out because we don't get the chance to do that because we don't live in the same city anymore. But this is as much a safe place for any of you guys and gals and those of you who don't prescribe to established gender norms, whether you're
Mm-hmm.
gay or straight or bisexual or pansexual, if you're asexual, if you are trans or non-binary, if you're not sure where you fall on that spectrum, if you are super solid
Yeah.
in your masculinity or femininity, whether you're black or you're white, you're Asian, Hispanic, mixed race. I mean, case in point, me. This is supposed to be a safe space for you guys. There are things that we
Mm-hmm.
do not tolerate here. Hate speech, in particular, in any form.
Yeah.
Those phobic behaviors are not welcome here. And
Yeah.
I want to say this and I want to address this. Just because I have a good handle on necessarily what is, not racially okay to say, these, especially a lot of what's going on with the Black Lives Matter movement, which
Yeah.
I have to say, keep pushing, guys. This
Yeah, for
fight
sure.
isn't over. I am, I'm a guy. I'm a dude. I say dumb dude stuff every now and again, and I want it. It always brings me a certain amount of joy whenever I say something. I get called out for it because that is a learning moment for me. Because it is never will I say something ignorant with the express purpose of hurting somebody. I say something ignorant because I don't know. And then when somebody takes me aside, there was a post I made almost a year ago that our friend Emily, she DM'd me about and said, "Hey, that there may be a better way to word that." And I told her, thank you. Like that's it was
Yeah.
I said something to the effect of, for all my women and women identifying friends, happy Women's Day. And she said something to the effect of, in a small way that might disenfranchise, or I don't remember the exact word that she used, but it would make people who are either transgender or
Oh, I
non-binary,
see.
like it
There's a distinction
yeah, it
implied.
delegitimizes them to a certain extent. So
Yeah.
the two things I did was, one, I thanked her. Two, I made a follow up post just to all my women and identifying things, and I made a point to address the fact that I had earlier said this, and I'm going to leave that
Right.
up because a lot of times people just see, oh, here's this person in front of us, and a lot of people are sometimes ashamed of what they were. I mean, I've gone back and I've deleted stupid Facebook posts and stuff like that. We all do that because they're so
Mm-hmm.
far removed from what we are. But in that moment, I wanted to address something in specific where I thought that what I had said was inclusive,
Right.
and to some circles it is. But there was a simpler, better way to phrase that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know that just making a monetary donation and a slap on the hand for one of your developers is a good way to go about addressing something like that. But
Yeah.
I am also kind of in the camp that if it's something that you can address and something that you can teach somebody to be better about, I've also kind of shied away sometimes from the whole, oh, well, just fire them. Specifically when it comes to game developers, like, okay, if I found out tomorrow or later tonight that if I found out that a revered, well, I don't even know that I call him revered anymore, but a figure in the gaming sphere, we'll call him Hod Towered, turned out to be a vehement racist, that he He hated black people and he hated Asians. I might want him fired. I might be a little upset about that. But if I had found out that one of the artists who, I almost make this as a joke, but this is actually kind of a thing that happened. Not the commentary, but just what I'm about to say. This was an actual job. One of the artists who was in charge of creating the fully textured model for 2B's butt, if I found out that he maybe said a gay joke that wasn't super okay, but something that you can teach somebody to be like, hey, that's not okay, and they're like, oh shit, I'm sorry, I didn't, okay, I know
Right.
now. That's, be better, and then keep up the good work.
Yeah. I
You don't
think,
need to fire him.
I mean, and this is, I think in a very important and real way, my voice matters least on this. But if anyone is interested to hear my opinion on it, I do think that there, to what you're speaking about, I don't have the authority to say this as someone who's really not a member of a marginalized group, but my thought process as to how I would make my judgments about it, about a person, would be like, what is, I don't want to, I almost feel like saying like, what is the intention, is kind of it gets kind of problematic because intention doesn't always matter. And I completely accept that. But I think, and like you say, it depends upon the severity of the infraction. If someone makes a slightly insensitive joke, or even like in the case of a post that, like, I'm sure I've made posts like that where it's just like, you could have said that better. That's not a moment of, this person is, hateful. That's a moment of, this person maybe hasn't taken, I mean, I know I've done this many times, maybe hasn't taken enough time to educate themselves on what the proper vocabulary would be, and is now going to adjust the behavior accordingly. I feel like there's a big difference between that, even in the case of like, if someone made a joke like that and then was like, oh, this brought to my attention that that's actually a very sensitive issue and I'm not going to do that. It's that moment of, you kind of should have already known that, but at the same time, you're not doubling down your behavior. And as much as I hate to say it, I feel like that doesn't mean we have to absolve them, but it is going above and beyond compared to what most people do, which I hate. I hate that that's true. But there's so many people now, including our president, who, when they're called out for these just awful things that they do, instead of taking it, like you say, taking that moment to be like, thank you for correcting me, thank you for giving me that teachable moment, they'll double down and they'll triple down. And they'll say, not only was what I not said wrong, sorry, not only was what I said not wrong, I'm going to say it again louder.
He is not doubling down. He splits and then doubles down.
I can't. It's no. Go ahead. It's
So yeah, it's this cycle of just insanity that I have watched happen over the past 5 years, and to this day, it baffles me that we're in this situation. Anyway, so this game made by 3D Realms, to give a little bit of background.
What are we doing?
To give a little bit of background, I only know this because I've been watching a lot of Civi11's YouTube videos. Who I'll send you a link for, because some of his videos are pretty great. He does a lot of what he calls boomer shooters, and I'll explain that here in a second. 3D Realms, which I believe used to be called Apogee Studios, they're the original makers of Duke Nukem, which I assume you know who that is.
Yeah.
Okay. Fun fact, Duke Nukem didn't start out as a first-person shooter. It started as a 2D side-scroller for the MS-DOS, I believe. And eventually they brought it in with Duke Nukem 3D, and it eventually became Duke Nukem Forever, which is that game that spent like 11 years in development and still sucked. It is one of the very few moments where I believe it was Shigeru Miyamoto who said a rushed game will always be bad, but a delayed game can be good eventually. There are a couple exceptions to that statement, but it was a general statement that he made. Generally speaking, if you work on a game long enough, it will be good. Part of the problem with DNF, eventually I'll talk about Ion Fury. Part of the problem with Duke Nukem Forever is just it was passed on to so many developers throughout its development cycle that by the time it got
Yeah.
to Gearbox, they just wanted to finish it and get it out. They were They didn't. They were done.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and I think you also run into the issue of too many cooks in the kitchen.
yeah, it just
You're switching studios. It's the same thing happens with, you know, non-interactive visual media like, movies and TV shows.
yeah, you pass on to too many directors, too many producers. It becomes a garbled mess. But 3D Realms hasn't really made a ton of games since then. They'll come up with a game here and there. But then they put out in association with another studio, they put out Ion Fury. I think it released fairly recently, within the past year or so. A couple of fun facts about that game. One, aside from the other two, well, the one not so fun fact and the one litigation fact.
Right, right.
This game is built in an engine that is like 30 years old, or some 25 years old. It's built in the build engine, which the original like first person Duke Nukem 3D Duke Nukem 3D, that's what it was originally built in. And not to be confused with the Doom engine, where Doom 1 and 2 are played and stuff like that. But it's already has this like super strong retro feel because it uses a lot of like all the enemies are sprites, all the weapon picks up are voxels, but it's with this incredible polish. There's a lot of moments in that game that are supremely frustrating, but there was never a single moment where I was sitting there thinking, this wasn't very well thought out, or this needed more time. It does this thing that only exists in a couple other video games where it does this whole unbroken narrative thing. There's never a moment where your control is really taken away, except at the very beginning where they show you the intro cutscene at the very end when you're blowing things up for the last time. But all the levels just move from one to another, so you kind of have this really refreshing feeling of consistent forward momentum throughout the entire game. You're playing Shelly. I don't remember whether her last name is, but she's part of the like Global Defense Force or something like that. She's a future cop. In this, like, what strikes me is like it's almost like this fascist like neo-technical government, but you're faced with bioterrorists who are coming at you with this genetically enhanced cult. So maybe Shelly isn't part of the good guys because she's one of like the cops in this neo-fascist society, but she is protecting people from the mutants. So 6 of one, half dozen of the other. She's not so bad. She's also got some half decent quips here and there. And the gal who does the voice acting for her is incredible. Fun fact: the guy who plays the bad, there's only like 2 voice actors in that entire game. There's the guy who plays Shelly, and then there's the voice actor for Haskell, the bad guy, who's played by John St. John, who, fun fact, is the original voice for Duke Nukem.
Huh.
He does a really great job of showing off his range of action because Haskell's like this. He's this mad scientist and working through all these problems, and you're so persistent, Shelly. I'm this, that, and the other. And then you have Duke Nukem who's like, I'm gonna tear off your head and shit down your neck. Your ass is grass. Like that. And so a lot of things I love about this game is just like it has that retro feel. There's like 37 secrets in every level, and I've missed most of them because they're set in these weird ways where some of them are you have to blow open like a grate, or some of them you just go off the beaten path. There's a couple of them where you have to take an item in the environment and push it to a different spot, and then use that as a climbing pedestal. And sometimes it's move this trash can. But the people who are, this is 3D Realms who's had years and years of experience with this engine. So they know that a broom that they place in the environment has the same properties as a chair that they place in the environment. So if you push a chair to a location, you can use that. Or you could push the friggin' broom up to a wall and use that to climb into your vent so you can find your extra 15
so
shotgun shells. Like that, it's that level of
God.
like understanding of the engine where Civ 11 puts it best, where they just use this weird build engine like witchcraft to make things happen that there's I think he talks about how one of the game developers explained how they did a certain trick to him, and he equated it to explaining quantum physics to a 9-year-old, because that's the level of wizardry that was happening. And there's moments
Wizardry.
like that. The thing that I really love with this game, the level progression is really good. There's never a moment where I thought this is a bad level. I had moments of this is a frustrating level, but never a bad moment. Every weapon has a consistent use, even if you're too stupid to utilize them, which I ran into. I'm not smart enough to use one of the grenades in the game. That's really the issue that I ran into, because there's no manual for the game. They don't tell you what everything does. They just kind of like figure it out. And let's see, you have a 18-shot revolver, but it fires in groups of 3, and not a burst of 3. It just fires 3 shots at once.
What?
So it is essentially a 6-shot revolver, but the aesthetics give it, the shotgun blast of 45 caliber bullets. It's that to give you an idea.
Silly, and I love it.
Yeah,
The arm breaker.
You have a rotary barrel shotgun that doubles as the grenade launcher, and the way it doubles is you just load different ammunition into it. It looks like a 40mm grenade launcher that you just break open and either put in what I can only assume are 38,000 pellet shells.
Shotgun shells.
You're loading up grape shot for a cannon into this thing. You have
yes, the sternum breaker.
Yeah, you have the shock stick. They give it a different name. I don't remember what it is, but it's a stun baton that you can use it to like actually electrocharge items in the environment. Use it to power up some of the generators. But you can also, the alt fire for it is you just stab somebody with it and shock them and stun them. Then I mentioned every weapon has an alt fire. So the pistol, the alt fire for that is you can tag up to 3 targets, and she'll just headshot each of those 3 targets with two bursts. Indispensable for dealing with some of the flying enemies. You have the penetrator. Don't laugh. It's a submachine gun.
Not laughing.
But it fires superheated flechets, so it lights people on fire. And the alt fire is just to pull a second one out of hammer space. You have the bowling bombs, which are one of the weapons I was too stupid to figure out until after it was explained to me. The alt fire is what I ended up using the most. Where you just,
bombs?
Yeah, the alt fire, you just light it up like a bomb and lob it at somebody, and it'll explode on impact or on a timer. I didn't realize if you use the primary fire, it just rolls, and eventually will auto target something and just go roll after it and kill it.
Oh my god!
Yeah, I didn't realize that.
Funny.
And if you hold that down, it just powers up the bomb as well as the throw strength. There's the cluster puck, which is the other weapon I was too stupid to figure out. It's just another like grenade that you can throw and explodes on impact. But if you use the alt fire for it, it turns it into a cluster bomb that is much more dangerous. It also sticks to walls. You have the ion bow, which I think is my favorite weapon in the game, and I didn't realize it was my favorite weapon in the game until like 6 stages too late. Where one shot, it works like Chewie's crossbow or Chewie's bolt caster.
Right.
One shot, you can headshot most enemies, it'll kill them. If you hold down the alt fire, it'll start racking up additional charges. But the great thing is that it doesn't affect how you have to reload it. So you can load it up with 5 charges, and it'll expend 5 ammo, but it only counts as 1 shot for the magazine.
Oh.
So you can burn through your ammo super fast with it, but you don't have to reload super often.
Yeah.
Or, and I didn't know this until way later, you can overcharge it. And then what it does is instead of just fire it like, oh, it overcharges it, fire 1 super powerful blast. No. Does it fire in rapid succession? Almost. What it'll do is it'll fire a shotgun burst of each of these shots. Each shot only counts as one ammo, but each individual bolt counts as an individual bolt. And then it will do that in rapid fire for about 15 shots.
What the fuck?
I didn't know this until my second playthrough. There's a boss that you fight. It's an assault mech that you have to fight, which took me like 10 tries to get through my first run. It's because I didn't know the secret of the ion bow. It only takes, like, I burned through most of my shotgun shells, all my penetrator ammo, all my bowling bombs. Like, I burnt through everything. And even went through most of my ion bow ammo because I didn't know about the secret death function that it has. And then instead, I was just like, all right, fuck you. Chunk, 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 chunk. And just, I destroyed it. It's incredible. It's the best weapon in the game. Oh, and I guess you also get a chain gun, but there's really nothing to say about that. That's the most normal weapon in the game, because it's just a chain gun.
It really doesn't have a shotgun function.
No, you can
Fire
just spin
every
it up.
bullet in the chain at once.
Yeah,
Your character just the character just holds up the chain like this, and just goes like all of them shoot at once in a
yeets it at
flat
them.
line.
No, it's just a regular ass chain gun. I guess it does, like, it jibs enemies fairly easily, and most of them will explode into armor, I guess. Like, how lame. But
Not even a shotgun.
I know, right? They have this
Imagine
weird...
it weapon, but also shotgun.
Yeah, exactly. Why can't it fire? How come, like, why can't it be a gun that also does my taxes? Like, this is, come on, 3D realm, step it up. 0 out of 10 game, doesn't do taxes. But really, well and truly, like, I did have moments where I had to step away from the game because I was getting so frustrated, but I never had a moment of being frustrated because it felt incomplete. And it's definitely, like, in that category of old retro style FPS games but being made with current day knowledge, but not doing a lot of that shit that I hate in modern first person shooters.
Yeah.
Such as regenerating health.
Not a fan of that, huh? See, I need that because I suck.
I mean, there's a time and place for it. It definitely, like, adds to the fun of a game and definitely helps with, like, forward momentum in a shooter experience. But I mean,
I do like I like the option like in Halo where you have a shield that regenerates, but your base health doesn't regenerate. It adds that sense of stakes to taking damage, but also doesn't allow someone like me who's bad to actually play.
well, it gives you the option to give you that forward combat, to give you that option to be aggressive, and to also use your health as a resource to be like, hey, am I
Right.
willing to go even further? Yes or no.
Right.
But yeah, that's my long tirade on why the Marauder I think is not a super great addition to Doom Eternal. So I think we've been going for an hour and 45 minutes, which is a lot longer than I think we originally planned, but I mean that's kind of how these things
That's
go. Is there anything else that we wanted to cover today?
I mean, I kind of wanted to talk more about Spyhander, but at the same time, I feel like I need to read the book more.
Well, we need to actually
And I know
crack it
you,
open and look at it.
I know you didn't get the chance to look at it, so maybe we can save that for next time. Other than that, I feel like we've covered a lot. It's been, it's always funny to me how well things can sometimes fit together narratively when we just, we have a couple ideas and we just come on into it. But other than that, no, I think that's most of what I wanted to cover today.
All right. Well, you have anything you want to plug before signing off?
I just want to plug really quickly the GoFundMe. I want to make sure it's still open. Let me just check here. I don't know if you heard about the two protesters who were struck on I-5
Yes.
on the 4th.
I think I saw that video and it made me sick to my stomach.
It's really awful. For those that aren't aware, I'm looking at the New York Times article right now. For those of you who are aware, on late at night on the 4th of July on I-5 near Seattle, some peaceful protesters who were on a closed highway were struck by a driver who came down the wrong way, circumventing the police barricades. And most people were able to get out of the way, but 2 people were unfortunately struck, and 1 was killed. I believe Summer Taylor was her name, or their name. I think they go by they, them. But I wanted to plug the fundraiser for Diaz Love, who is the other individual who was struck. And I
Who has
believe
been
they
getting
also go
death
by they,
threats on
them.
her Facebook?
Really?
You abominable human beings. I mean, let's be real. Most of you who are, all of you who are listening to this are probably not the kind of people to do that. But if you are, how dare?
Just what? Like I don't need to get into that, but just why? But I was right. They do go by they, them. But I wanted to plug that GoFundMe. I will post it in the chat, if I can. Yeah,
When
want to
this
plug
goes up
that.
on when this goes up on YouTube, we'll have that link
We'll put it in
available
the
as well.
description. Yeah. And obviously I know it's a tough time financially for people, and if you can't donate to that, that's totally fine. I just mostly wanted to raise awareness, and send some love their way. Well, that's what I wanted to plug. Anything you want to plug?
Mostly that. I mean, I think I'd seen something about the GoFundMe for that, but I haven't been on social media much today, so I didn't see
Mm-hmm.
that. So I'm glad to see that there's something there. I encourage anybody to, if you're not able to donate, give it a signal boost at the very least. It is astounding what can be done with just a simple share.
Mm-hmm.
I want to plug that. I mean, obviously, we'll plug our Twitters and stuff like that as well, and you can find those in the
Oh yeah.
description for the YouTube video. And eventually, we'll figure out how we're going to distribute this podcast on Spotify.
Probably
I think
YouTube, right?
YouTube actually might be the best way to do it. And just we'll have 2 episodes that are lost to time, and we won't worry about that. No,
I mean, I
we'll
could
figure something out for them. But other
Oh,
than
quick note. Sorry, go ahead.
no, go for it.
I just wanted to note that the last episode, for those who watched us live, unfortunately, I messed up the recording, and so that will not be available later. So if you saw that live, congrats. That's now lost to time. You're a testament to my error.
But yeah, follow us. Follow us on Twitter. The at TIWAKS. It was at TIWAKS. At Twitter.gov. This is where this is where it all comes apart. This is where it all fails. This is it. Remember to don't put your cats in state penitentiaries. They don't have a concept for consequences. Bye, everybody.